Okay, thank you.
Do you want me to start sharing the presentation?
Yeah, would you? Whoever's going to be
Yeah,
manning that,
let
go
me.
for it.
How's that?
Any chance you can go full screen?
Oh, I know what you mean.
Yeah, I don't know the hotkey on Mac. Windows would just be F11, but
Let me figure this out.
okay, I'm going to start admitting people since they're joining right after
Okay.
you finish sharing. And then I'll let everybody know we're going to wait a couple of minutes. We'll plan to get started at 12:05. We'll give people time to slip in and then I'll do an intro. So I'll buy you guys a little bit more time so we can fill a little bit more of the hour.
Okay.
Somebody want to play music or something?
Whoever's doing screen share would have to play the music. Otherwise it doesn't work well. So I can do that, but you guys would have to take over once we started the actual presentation.
I am still trying to figure out full screen, so
Okay, I will. Oops. I don't know, what's professional? I think music's gonna be not worth it. Are you good to go on the screen share, Matt? I'm gonna admit people.
I can't figure out this full screen thing.
Okay, then don't worry about it.
Oh, nope, I just did. But I don't have my speakers.
That's okay. I mean, is that okay? I can share screen if that would be more helpful.
No, I got it.
Okay. All right, let's admit all of these lovely people who are in the waiting room. All right, thank you everyone for joining. We're gonna wait just another minute or two while we allow any more people to slowly drip in. We'll plan to get started at about 12:04, at least that's Central Time. Okay, I haven't seen anybody else enter the waiting room, so I think we'll go ahead and get started a little earlier than I said. But thank you everybody for joining. We would ask that you please stay on mute during the presentation. We will have questions and answers at the end. If you have any questions throughout, feel free to post them in the Zoom chat. I will be monitoring the chat and helping to do some administrative things as we go along. We have a great webinar series lined up for you throughout this entire year, kicking off in Q1 with our webinar today, which Matt and Brian will get into momentarily. We will continue to send out emails as the different webinars get closer. In 2 weeks, on February 7th, we have, or maybe that's 3 weeks, we have the next webinar, which will be a feature spotlight on our what if calculator. So be excited for that. Otherwise, stay tuned in your inboxes for the rest of the emails that we'll send out. We've already shown the calendar for Q1 and all the webinar links are in there, but we'll continue to send those reminders as it gets closer. So we would encourage you to attend if you have time. And thank you all for attending today. We'll go ahead and get started into the webinar today. I'd like to introduce Matt Rose and Brian Raymaker, who are both attending today. They have both spent a lot of time in Captivate IQ, and we're really lucky to have them here today. For Matt, he's been here a little under 3 years. He's worked in a variety of positions, including enterprise implementation, as well as customer adoption, where he was the manager of that team. And he's currently the manager of our global support team. Prior to Captivate IQ, he was a commission architect at a commission software company, and he is an enjoyer of board games and the great outdoors. Brian Raymaker has been at Captivate for over 4 years, serving as a founding member of both our implementation and partners teams, and he is currently the senior manager of partners and enablement at Captivate IQ. Brian is an avid cyclist and fly fisherman as well. Thank you guys so much for your time in putting together this webinar. I'll give the balance of the time to you guys.
Thanks, Blake. Like Blake said, we have a lot of cool stuff to talk about today. We went through the introduction. After that, high level, why do we use Captivate IQ? Just to give us a groundwork to start off from. After that, where Captivate IQ fits within your overall tech stack. Common changes to the business that may impact how you use Captivate, the data that comes in, that flows out. And then we'll get into the meat of, now that we understand the baselines, how do we best get value out of automation? How do we think about putting these changes into Captivate, as well as some of the timing visibility constraints, and then open up for Q&A at the end. So diving right in, why do we use Captivate? Some of you have heard the sales pitches, but just high level, there's a lot of different reasons and values that can be derived from using this type of software. First and foremost in my mind is the automation, the ability to automate a lot of the more manual tasks in your lives of calculating commissions, from data flows to the creation of statements and sending things out. In addition to that, there's the visibility aspect. Allowing leaders, reps, even people outside of Captivate to be able to see different metrics and the data flows. It keeps your system secure, keeps an audit log, as well as keeping everything in one place. And as needed, there's a team that knows Captivate that can help through our support or post-implementation services as needed if there is a piece that you do want to outsource as far as your comp plan. So overall, there's a lot of different reasons that you might touch on or you might be feeling as far as why we use Captivate, but these are some of the main ones that we see. Ryan, did you have anything you wanted to add here?
No, not at the moment. I think we all know and understand the value that the Captivate IQ can bring our organizations. That's why we bought the software in the first place. Our next slide here, just putting into perspective, Matt just hit on the value that Captivate IQ brings. I think an important call out here is understanding that making Captivate IQ our source of truth, providing that visibility to our stakeholders, all of those awesome benefits, the reasons why we purchased Captivate IQ, it isn't always up to Captivate IQ, the system, the team administering the system, and recognizing that your ICM platform sits smack dab in the middle of your tech stack generally. So when we think about visibility, automation, security, things like that, it could be a function of the broader tech stack. So understanding that in a simplified example, very high level, generally the things that we have flowing into the system, employee and plan inputs, deal data, invoicing data, things like that. Captivate IQ is going to be beholden to those upstream systems coming from commissions. I know we're all aware with the old adage, garbage in, garbage out. It holds true, and we can only work with the data that we're given. So something to keep in mind. We all want our comp programs to be up and running and humming and as automated as possible. But it's important to recognize that the best laid intentions of Captivate IQ are still beholden to some of our upstream and downstream systems and stakeholders, is really the important call out here. So updates across these upstream inputs are going to have impacts within Captivate IQ, potentially the systems downstream from Captivate IQ here as well. Matt, anything you'd add there?
Just the biggest thing that it looks really nice like this. I understand when in practice, sometimes the lines are loop-de-loops and turn around and do things, and it can be really messy, but ultimately Captivate IQ fits somewhere in the middle. So I think you put it pretty well overall.
You bet.
Yeah.
You bet. So yeah, kicking this back to Matt. So this is we talked about Captivate IQ high level. What are we hoping to accomplish? We started to drill into in theory, how does this all come together? And now in practice, we'll kick it back to Matt, but we'll really trying to position knowing that Captivate IQ is this middleman. What does that look like in your day-to-day business? And that kind of flows directly into our topic today around business practices, and how that eventually affects your ICM system.
Yeah. And as we were thinking through some of the most common scenarios, you can see on the left-hand side, we put some of the main stakeholders that help influence some of the decisions that ultimately impact comp plans. And on the right-hand side, some of the business practices that affect comp. And smack dab in the middle is Captivate, right on top of what can be sometimes a pretty messy or last minute or human scenarios. I put some lines in and just bring it down to exact levels going through that, where sales impacts the payout structure. Maybe they come and say, hey, in Q4, we want to add a spiff. And your mind should immediately start turning. It's like, okay, how should this impact Captivate? Does it put it in? If so, where? How should it impact other calculations that may already be in there? Is everyone involved? Who is eligible? What products are eligible, etc. So what can be a pretty simple ask as far as let's do a spiff can turn into something that has a lot of different questions about how and when. Another line we put in is sales and personnel, where if your sales team is adding another team to EMEA, as far as how does that impact? Do they use the similar plans as what's already set up? Are they going to use a new subset? Is the payout timing going to be different? Everything like that are different thoughts to think through in changes like this. Sales ops may add a process that they say, hey, instead of just sending the payouts to the reps to review, let's have it hit the managers first, or let's change part of the comp process overall. IT may change the data structure on you, which we've seen a lot of times, as far as either changing where the data is housed, changing the data type, adding new data, or removing data that had previously been used to make calculations. You now need to find other sources or other areas in which to make that same calculations. Where business intelligence may ask for reporting on which products are doing the best in which territories so that they can drive business decisions. All of that information lives in Captivate as it's being calculated, and so the reports can be generated there as well. Then leadership may say something similar as far as, I want to report on which teams are doing the best, or I want a cost of sales report. And these are just a handful of examples as far as what business practices affect comp. Not only what affect comp, but what might change to affect comp as far as the stakeholders and the different processes that might do it. So for each one of these, part of my argument is that often, and sometimes these decisions are made in a vacuum, as much as possible, getting ahead of these to be able to ultimately drive the decision of how, when, where to put it in is most beneficial here.
You bet. Thanks, Matt. I mean, this is a neat slide just in terms of reminding ourselves that as comp professionals, it's really not just the comp plans and the day-to-day administration that eat up a lot of our time, but it's stakeholder management. It's trying to get a seat at the table across all these different teams and departments within our organizations as they make decisions that impact pay scales and day-to-day administration. So a good reminder, and I think a good transition into the meat and potatoes of our webinar today, knowing why we bought Captivate IQ, the value we're trying to bring to our organizations, where Captivate IQ sits within our tech stack, as well as the multitude of changes across any number of stakeholders that potentially impact our system. How do we actually think about net new requirements, requests coming from some of these stakeholders, and that decision around what the heck goes into my ICM system? What goes into Captivate IQ? Brain. That's funny. But as Blake mentioned off the top here, I have carved out a strange little niche for myself within the commission space. It's where I have built my career, and this discussion around the ROI of automation is whether it is a fresh customer, a brand new implementation, or a customer that's been with us for years and years, and maybe they're coming back to us with a system refresh or whatever. This is one of the very first conversations I try to get in front of some of my admins, just in terms of understanding how should we be thinking about our priorities? How should we be thinking about building out this system that's flexible, that scales, and that we can hopefully use for a long, long time without more professional services intervention? And so for me, thinking about the ROI of automation, we're going to step through these one by one, but it starts with consistent data, consistent logic, static processes, and an understanding of how often these net new requirements happen. And taking a step back here, when I think about the optimal ICM implementation, my goal, especially for a new customer, a fresh implementation, my goal is not to automate 100% of that process. I want to sit down with that admin and discuss what's our low-hanging fruit, what's going to be our highest ROI, what's going to move the needle most, understanding that there are bits and pieces of your comp plan, your processes, your structures that may need to be flushed out and are not ready to be fully automated within a system. Starting with consistent data, Matt, if you could take us to our next one here. This is just an example, the type of, what do I mean when I say consistent data? The big thing here is if one of your stakeholders comes to you and says, hey, we'd like to run this spiff, we want to drive new logos, can you execute this? The first question is, well, where's that data coming from? Is it consistent enough to actually load into our system and calculate appropriately? There are three things that I think about when it comes to a data source for a net new requirement coming into our system. The first one, consistent data formats. You'll notice in our ARR column, we have a numeric field. We have a couple string entries into that same field. That gives us trouble when trying to automate a calculation within Captivate IQ. We need our numeric fields to be numeric. We need our string fields to be strings. We can't have crossover there. Otherwise, we're going to have to add complexity to our system as we try to identify some string manipulations and things like that to basically cut out the important stuff based on what the reps are entering. So that's first and foremost, do we have reliable data? Do we have reliable data? Can it be entered directly into our system? The second one, this is pretty obvious. Sorry, Matt, back to data. Just consistent columns. Can we consistently replicate the same poll over and over and over again? And then a consistent refresh criteria. So an understanding of when is that deal deemed commissionable, and when is it eligible for a true up? If we pay that spiff in April and the ARR on that deal changes in June, is that change in ARR eligible for the incremental payment adjustment? That's a question that we need to ask and understand as we kind of work through these updates from our stakeholders. The last thing I'll say here, within Captivate IQ, we do have, and this is something we always have to talk through with our customers, but understanding that within commissions, there's no such thing as perfect data. We always wish it was just a bit better. And so asking for perfection with some of these, especially with some of these new requirements or new policies coming from our leadership, it just isn't there. And so understanding that we still need to get this into Captivate IQ, what are our options? And so overrides within your system, overriding specific fields that are consistently needing that manual touch, CSV uploads where maybe the initial version of that automation is actually massaging the data outside of Captivate IQ and loading it directly into the system. I know we all want those direct data integrations, but depending on the quality of our data, it's not always possible. We can still get that data into the system through those CSV uploads. And then the final piece is data massaging directly within Captivate IQ. The SQL transformations with the Excel-like syntax of our calculation engine would actually allow us, if the data massaging is consistent and repeatable, if your analysts are pulling data directly from Salesforce and massaging it in consistent ways month after month, we could figure out a way to replicate those steps. If cleaning up the data in Salesforce itself is not an option, we could talk about doing that data massaging directly within Captivate IQ. Understanding that, and this leads into my next slide here, Matt, understanding that we need consistent logic to automate anything. So consistent logic here, pretty straightforward concept. The defined set of rules needs to be consistent across roles, across plans, however we kind of slice and dice that new requirement. It needs to be relatively consistent. The big things that I like to highlight here, inputs within Captivate IQ. So employee or plan variables such as quotas, rates, bonus amounts. Matt, help me out here. I mean, anything and everything that is plan specific, employee specific. Matt, anything standing out to you?
And it doesn't mean that it can't change, but that the changes are consistent themselves. As far as if we know that there is something that's going to be about a product type, the product might change, but it will always be based on a product. In that, it's consistent logic.
You
or
bet.
It's always going to be based on dates or things. That's a main.
You bet. And that's a good call out. When I think about inputs, I think about something that can be effective dated and easily rolled into our broader calculation versus structural aspects of that new requirement that within Captivate IQ, it's just a bit harder to effective date or mix and match pieces of logic within similar qualifications. So within similar plans, within similar roles. One thing to be aware of is, like with anything else within Captivate IQ, there are workarounds. But especially when it comes to the logic piece, the more workarounds you build in, the more complexity you're potentially building into your system. So understanding that Captivate IQ is super flexible. We can do almost anything. It does come with a trade-off around that complexity. Matt, anything you'd add there?
I think that's great.
You bet. So moving on to the third kind of the third question for my admins on an engagement. when they come to me saying, Brian, I have this new requirement. How should we think about this? My first question is, well, how often does this thing change? Let's talk about your comp plan historically. Let's take a look at your previous exception tracking, things like that, and try to understand, is this a moving target? Is this the fourth time that leadership has revamped clawbacks in the last 4 years? Is this spiff something that gets addressed each and every month? Things like that. And if it's a moving target, not saying that we can't get it into Captivate IQ, but we should think about, and Matt will touch on this in a moment, but we should think about that crawl, walk, run phasing of automation, rather than saying, let's integrate this data, let's set that logic in stone, let's automate this 100%, knowing that historically, our efforts around automation might be undone within the next quarter, within the next year, whatever that turns out to be. So when we think about automation within Captivate IQ, making sure that we aren't shooting at a moving target, I think is super important, and something we at least need to talk about when given an update in business requirements, and then pivoting and thinking about, how do I get that in Captivate IQ? And our last piece here, frequency. How often does this happen? How painful is it when it happens? And is our time, ultimately, is our time worth the effort of actually fully automating this within Captivate IQ? This is something, again, understanding that myself, Matt, Blake, we don't feel the pain of your day-to-day administration. If something happens twice a year, but it takes your team 2 weeks to work through that, test it, verify that it's flowing into all of the relevant statements and reports and all of that, definitely, let's talk about it. Maybe we can improve your life. But generally speaking, if the pain isn't, if the pain of that once or twice per year thing is reasonable, maybe we can tackle some higher priority, more frequent items from your wish list. So those are, when I think about ROI and net new requirements from our stakeholders within the business and how we approach Captivate IQ, those are my top 4 things, and how I would, how I like to think about ROI and getting things into the system. The next question is, well, Brian, we've gone through this ROI discussion. Me as the admin, I've done some stakeholder management. We have all agreed across our commissions team, this is worth getting into the system. The next question is level of effort. How do we actually think about that ROI? And from here, Matt's gonna walk us through, how do we approach the crawl, walk, run idea of automation within Captivate IQ?
Yeah, which I have she's almost a 3-month-old, and so I'm excited to see this in my personal life as far as kind of the transition from crawl, walk, run. And it's kind of interesting to think about it from a business perspective as well, where crawling it's clunky. You're moving, but it isn't necessarily elegant. Walking, again, it's better than crawling, but may not be exactly where you're wanting it to go. And running is kind of the optimal case of your setup. And like Brian mentioned, the goal here isn't to automate absolutely everything. It's not to put everything possible in the system, because in some cases there is that manual effort, whether it's a business practice, whether it's something that doesn't make sense to put in. There will be those cases. However, for everything else, let's talk about what that looks like. And in my mind, it comes down to the return on investment. Are we spending 20 hours to put something in that takes us 1 hour a year to do? Number two is the timing. Do we have the time to put it in the correct state, or do we need to do something for all this month, walk next month, and then we can put it more fully into the system, as well as the visibility. Even if it's not saving us time, even if we have time to put it in, is it data that we are going to want to show either in statements or reports or some other visible means that needs to live in Captivate? And so generally between those three is helps kind of determine, are we crawling right now? Are we walking, or are we running? What does that look like in this case? Crawling is generally, in my mind, a very manual overview. So overrides, manual adjustments. Some of the scenarios I've seen are plans that are used by few individuals, especially where there's a refresh that's impacting every one of your plans. And if you have a lot of plans, you might say, this plan, let's get to it last. If we have to just put in the payments for the monthly payments at the first or second month so that we can really run on the other plans, that's one example I've seen of crawling. Other are infrequent components where it's annual bonuses or clawbacks that rarely happen, or that happen with very, very little timing for you to put it in the system. Calculations or calculation motions that frequently change. If every month they're changing their mind on one aspect or another, you might say, let's do a manual override in this case until we get things a little bit more static, or data that's manually imported. In a lot of cases, we can automate data import, but in some, it may be a thing of know-how or just having time to set it up appropriately. I've talked to some clients that were manually importing data from Google Sheets for their MBO plans because they didn't know about the data connectors that we can set up for them. Or if it needs to happen immediately, you might do a manual import and then set up the data connector for the next month. So that's crawling. And then once we get a little bit more stable or sophisticated, what does walking look like? To me, walking is generally something that's mostly automated or partially automated, but still requires some level of effort. In cases of, okay, let's get this payout changed within the next 2 days, you can put the logic in. The numbers are right, the numbers check out, but it might not be pulling through the statements in a way that's perfectly visible. And so for this month, you might have a few more questions, or the reports might not involve this new data. Second is data gets extracted, updated, and then re-imported for calculations. Data is rarely as clean as you wish it were. And in some cases, that's a pretty manual statement or a pretty manual process to update it. However, like Brian talked on earlier, if there is a cleanup process that can be automated, we can put that in Captivate as far as turning strings to numbers, replacing nulls with values, or if this column is blank, use this one type things. So that even though the manual step of exporting, cleaning up the data, re-importing it is a workaround in the moment, I wouldn't necessarily consider that to be running in the system. And then lastly another example is automations that work mostly always. For a client, they knew that if there was ever a break in employment, like maternity leave, then one aspect of their components wouldn't function for those employees. During the ROI discussions and things, they decided not to put that into the system overall and just make every time that it happened, they would handle that manually. So for pretty much everyone, it worked. However, there is danger with that as far as if there is transition of admins, or if you forget later on, that's where you're still walking and may stumble as you hit some of those roadblocks. And lastly, what does running look like? And when a change happens, usually I look for, what is this running option? What is the optimal case of where are we trying to get? How much time should it take out of your lives? Because the more we can set up to be running in this state, the more time you'll have available to focus on more important or vital matters rather than dealing with one-off exceptions or manual manipulations of data. So what does it look like? And usually, myself included, this gets taken for granted a lot because things work so smoothly. We've set up really, really complex calculations, and it's a black box where you put data in, data comes out, and it is running perfectly. And that is awesome. The less mental load as far as all of these calculations of the system, the better it can be. Another one is configuration-based approach, where maybe there's a spiff table that there are changes, there is a manual input, but it's a configuration-based change that impacts a wide range of users or plans or types, because instead of saying, okay, let's hard code a 5% bonus for every product sold in December, you can go in the table, add one line, and it flows in perfectly. So this is what I would consider to be running in your system, that things run smoothly. You don't have to think about them. They don't keep you up at night. And any changes that you do need to make are really simple to maintain, easy to put in, and things like that. This won't always be the case, but where possible, this is the optimal case that we try and encourage. Brian, what does walking, crawling, running, any thoughts there?
No, I think you nailed it, Matt. The big thing, and what I hope everyone takes out of our webinar today is really updates in business process and the corresponding changes to your Captivate IQ system. It's really about stakeholder management first and foremost. So working with your HR partners, working with your IT partners, working with your accounting folks, whatever that looks like. And when they have an ask coming down the pipe, you can help them think through what's the ROI of your ask? What are we looking at here? How often is this going to happen? Is this request apt to change in the near future? Where's our data coming from? What's the actual logic that's going to live within the system? Talking through that with your stakeholders, helping them understand that when they just throw ideas at you, this is your thought process. And then taking it that next step and saying, well, how much time does my team have to do this? And relating it directly back into the crawl, walk, run approach that we covered today should hopefully remove some of that stress for our admins around these quick asks from the business, things that impact Captivate IQ and our day-to-day administration of it. So Matt, if you could take us just to our closing slide here. We have designed a one-pager here, just kind of highlighting what we talked about today, something that we'll make available to all of our registrants. We'll put it out there on our Knowledge Center as well, but hopefully something that you can refer back to and just maybe hang in your office, whatever that looks like, but something to help guide that discussion, whether it's you admins with your direct stakeholders or for our professional services teams, our managed services teams, as they kind of go out on their engagements. But our guide to automation today, how do we think about plugging things into the system? So with that, Blake, keep me honest here, but we will share the recording, the deck on the Knowledge Center here later today. But let me pause here and see if we have any questions from the group around what we discussed today.
All right, I guess we'll take silence as a no. You have a few seconds. If anything comes up, please feel free to interrupt us. But if there are no questions, then I think we can go ahead and end the webinar here, and we can give everybody some time back. But as Brian mentioned, we'll be in touch. You will be able to find the recording and all of this on the Knowledge Center as well. If, let's say a month from now, you can't find the email that we send out. So if you have any further questions or anything comes up after this, please reach out to your CSMs. We are more than happy to engage with you through support, through other channels. So thank you everybody for your time today and for attending, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.